Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sports Porch. I hope you are all doing well. Welcome back into my NFL Power Rankings and Team Breakdowns. This is a series I started yesterday where day by day we're going to go through each team in the NFL up until the start of the regular season on Thursday, September 9th. Really glad that you guys showed the support that you did on that first video. I had a lot of people show up and watch that. Really appreciate it. It does mean a lot. It gives me more motivation to keep going and keep doing this video. So if you do like this content, please make sure to drop a like on this video. Subscribe and turn on post notifications so you know when the next power ranking video is up. So just for those who maybe not have seen the first video, I'm going to kind of explain. So this series is taking a look at teams' strengths, their weaknesses, a couple storylines for the season, win-loss predictions, as well as some guys to look out for in fantasy as well. Real quick, just a recap of the tier system in place here. First tier is Super Bowl contenders. Second tier is teams on the fringe of contention. The third tier is teams who are missing a few pieces or that it factor. The fourth tier is teams who have an outside chance or everything has to go right for them to make the playoffs. The fifth tier is non-factors with interesting pieces to watch. And the sixth tier is bottom dwellers who are just waiting for the 2022 season to start. I will leave descriptions for all of those with a little more explanation. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, but some of them could use with a little more explaining to sort of separate them out a little more. That will be in the description of this video and future power rankings, so I don't have to explain it every time, but we are still today in the bottom dwellers. This is the last team in this tier, and that unfortunately being the Detroit Lions. Real quick, just looking at their front office / coaching. GM Brad Holmes in his first year, Dan Campbell, Anthony Lynn, and Aaron Glenn, I believe, all in their first year as well. And then Dave Phipp, as your special teams coordinator. This is an entirely new regime for the 2021-2022 season, so the Lions are really starting fresh here. I love what Brad Holmes did in the draft. I also like that they've established a culture with Dan Campbell. They know exactly what they want to be, and if you've seen anything this offseason about Dan Campbell, you'll know what he's all about. Biting kneecaps, taking names along the way, and I think this offseason has just done nothing but establish that. So let's go ahead and start off with their strengths. First off, this running game is going to be very good here. As you'll see later in my fantasy players, there's going to be two guys who really stick out on this team. One of them being DeAndre Swift in his second year with the Lions. We know Anthony Lynn is a former running backs coach. Every time he is at a place, he's got at least one running back or two running backs who really thrive. We saw that with Melvin Gordon at the Chargers and later with Austin Eckler, who has really broken out as a standout running back in the NFL. I would say at this point, he's even a little bit underrated, a super underrated fantasy guy as well. But we'll get to him when we get to the Chargers, which will be a little later on in the series. So I really like Anthony Lynn here. Not the best head coach in the world, but you can still be a great coordinator. If not, look at the likes of Josh McDaniels, Pat Shurmur. There are multiple examples of guys who just aren't very good head coaches in the NFL, but they're great coordinators. And maybe the head coaching is just a little too much that they have on their plate. Along with this running game, the offensive line is one of the best in the NFL. Frank Ragnow, guys of his caliber. And then you've also got, the guy who just fell in their lap, probably second or third best prospect in this class overall, Penei Sewell, the tackle out of Oregon. He should be their starting right tackle, I believe, day one. And if he doesn't work out there, he is so athletic that he can move inside to guard, swing him out on the run. He really is perfect for this kneecap-biting mantra that Dan Campbell has set up here in Detroit with how much running they're going to be doing. And then the last plus on this team is going to be the tight end play. Everything within 5 to 10 yards, I think the short game is going to be really nice here in Detroit, especially with a guy like TJ Hawkinson. He's going to be another one of my fantasy guys on this list. watch out for him to have a breakout year, like a career year for TJ Hawkinson. Basically like a miniature version of Rob Gronkowski, George Kittle, those likes. And with Dan Campbell, who is arguably one of the best tight end coaches in the league, as well as bringing in this hard, smash mouth attitude that he has, I think that's really going to benefit TJ Hawkinson. As good as his run blocking already is, I think we'll see an even bigger step up in that category. And then he's just going to be a really nice piece for Jared Goff. So TJ Hawkinson is definitely a guy to watch out for breakout players this year to really cement himself in the top echelon of tight ends in the NFL. Now, as for weaknesses on this team, the wide receiver room immediately comes to mind. They are still a bottom dweller. I mean, Tyrell Williams as your number one, that's not anything to brag about. Losing Kenny Golladay in the offseason, it makes sense why he's gone. But it does hurt them right now, right? Which they are, a rebuilding team. And then as a whole, this team's talent just quite isn't there with the rest of the NFL. The offensive line is good. I would say everything in the running game is really nice with this team. But other than that, there's just not a whole lot else to get excited about. And speaking of which, the passing game is going to suffer here without Kenny Golladay, and mainly without Matthew Stafford, who now they bring in Jared Goff. We'll see how he does. So that's going to be interesting to watch this season. I do think they will be a bottom half to last-ish in the league in terms of their overall passing game, just because of the lack of receiver talent and all that comes with that. So then some storylines and some question marks heading into the season, sort of going off of that last point I just made. How well is Jared Goff going to play here? So I think that Jared Goff's career has had a very interesting trajectory, I can't spit that word out right, to this point in his career where he has always been viewed as the number one guy. Wherever he's been, he's always had it pretty easy as you can get it in the NFL. He was the man at Cal. He didn't really have much competition. He goes number one overall to the St. Louis and then to the Los Angeles Rams. Gets Sean McVay in there to really elevate his play. Gets a big contract. And now all of that is out of the window besides the contract. He is no longer guaranteed to be the guy going forward here in Detroit. And I think that really could put a chip on his shoulder and frankly make him work his ass off. We'll see how much that comes into fruition with this team. I hope it does. I hope he gets a spark lit underneath him. And I will say this, Jared Goff right now he's an average QB in the NFL. He's not like super terrible by any means, but he's not going to win you any games. I don't think the processor is quite there. I think McVay and his system and what he's able to do really helped to cover up a lot of Jared Goff's flaws. We heard multiple stories, saw multiple eyewitness accounts of fans at games where you would just see Sean McVay, talking into the headset to Goff until like the 15-second mark, I think it is, where they cut it off. Something which he probably won't have as big of a problem this year, having Matt Stafford on his team. So then the second question for this season, how is Aaron Glenn going to do with the secondary? And specifically with the likes of Jeff Okudah, number 3 pick in, was it last year's draft or the year before? I believe it was the 2020 draft. Got absolutely cooked this past season. He looked, frankly undeserving of that number 3 pick. And he just was not good for them at all. The secondary as a whole was really just terrible. Aaron Glenn comes in here as the defensive coordinator, is a former defensive backs coach, probably will take a lot of role with that here. So we'll see. We'll see with Jeff Okudah. I hope he turns out well. He still is, I think, a really highly touted cornerback prospect, but we just haven't seen it from him at a professional level yet. But he was a rookie last year, and we do know that rookie corners tend to get cooked a little bit, so we'll see how it goes with him. And then lastly, the question I have is, can Dan Campbell keep this culture up throughout the majority of the year? Because, spoiler alert, I mean, they're ranked 31 for a reason. I don't think they're going to win a lot of games. And Dan Campbell really has this ooh-rah-rah mentality to him, right? We're going to smash people in the mouth and we're going to kick ass and take names. Well, are they? That's the big question, is can they, while losing these games, still keep up that positive culture, that positive attitude, all the things that come with that. Whereas, with a more calculated coach, or I guess a more laid-back coach, it would be a lot easier for him to stay with his guys, right, and sort of keep their confidence by keeping calm and just, it's okay, guys, this is just the first year, right? We know we're not that great of a team, but we're still young, we're still building, all this stuff. Whereas it seems like Dan Campbell just wants to go out there and punch guys in the face every week, and I'm curious how they'll handle the losses, right? So that's a big question mark to me. One of my co-hosts for the Blitz podcast, Sam Daring, thinks that he's going to be Adam Gase 2.0. I don't quite think that. I think he'll be a fine head coach. He is definitely taking a CEO approach to it, I think. And as long as Anthony Lynn is here as offensive coordinator, I think they'll be fine on offense as long as they can get some help in the passing game. So I really like that he has reset the culture and brought in this really different approach. In the modern NFL, it's kind of like where everyone is zigging and they're zagging. That's my last question of the season for this team, so we'll have to keep an eye on that to see how team morale is. But I will say I don't think it can get any worse than it did under Matt Patricia, because he was truly a terrible, terrible head coach. So the three key players for this team, right off the bat, Jared Goff. I mean, as I said before on that long spiel, he's got a lot to prove. He's got a lot of people, specifically McVay and the Rams front office. He's got to prove them wrong, right? He's got to prove that maybe you shouldn't have traded Stafford. Maybe you should have kept me on the team instead. I think it was the right call that they traded him, but we'll see if he can make a comeback here with the Lions. Second player is Penei Sewell. It will be interesting to see how he steps into this team, straight into right tackle for the Lions, and how hard he plays and how well he plays. As we saw so many first-year tackles play well last year, specifically Mekhi Becton and Tristan Wirfs especially had one of the best young rookie tackle seasons we've ever seen. So he's an interesting guy to look out for. Really is a generational talent, lots of athleticism there. Fun player to watch. And then the third key player is Jeff Okudah. Just mentioned before, he's really got to get back to his Ohio State form. I mean, I think all the tools are there for him. He's got all the traits to be an elite corner. Aaron Glenn just has to help him, I think, put it all together, mainly. And I think with crowds returning this year, although granted Detroit won't be the biggest crowd, I think that might help a little bit as well, because last year offenses were just, at an all-time level in terms of efficiency without the crowds being there to interrupt their communication, things along that line. So then the three best fantasy players. I already touched on them a little bit earlier, but these first two guys I think could legitimately be first or second round picks in your fantasy drafts. First is DeAndre Swift. As I said before, Anthony Lynn coming into this team, already a running backs coach. You've got Jared Goff and a weak receiver room. And I guess this can be said about both these guys, both Hockenson and DeAndre Swift, who TJ Hockenson is my next guy. Weak wide receiver room. Jared Goff is your quarterback, who isn't known to be super accurate deep. He's got a decent arm, but I think the short game is going to be very important here. They're going to really emphasize the run, pounding the football, especially with that great offensive line that they have. I think both of these guys are going to have outstanding breakout seasons, and I think the wide receivers are going to suffer. So that's my thoughts there. Both of those guys could be draftable. Especially, I just think the world of TJ Hockenson. If you're in a dynasty league, he should be I think Kelsey and Kittle off the board 1 and 2. You could maybe make an argument for Waller. And if you don't take Waller, then I would say take Hawkinson at 3 for your dynasty leagues. He is that much upside, and he's so young still. And then lastly, I will put Jared Goff on this list just because as of right now, he is the definitive number 1. If you're doing a redraft league, he might be good as your bench option. You know, if your top guy goes down, he's not going to light the world on fire, but I think he'll do fine enough. Especially with a guy like Hawkinson, where he can find a reliable short field, short to intermediate target, like we saw with Jimmy G and George Kittle there when all those guys got hurt last year for the 49ers, including Kittle himself. But even when he came back, he was once again with the fantasy production right there. And then my sleeper player for dynasty leagues is Amon-Ra St. Brown out of USC. He was drafted in either the 4th or the 5th round. He is a little further down in the depth chart, but I think he has a chance to rise. I mean, he's only got, Tyrell Williams and Brashad Perriman and a couple other guys, maybe, Quintez Cephas, to beat out. I think he has a chance to see the field. He's for sure their 4th receiver, as well as that he is also their kick returner, their punt returner, so he might be able to get you some points there as well, depending on how your league scores, that type of stuff. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but this entire time this video has been going on, there's been a thunderstorm, so they got the sirens blaring for that. Sorry if you can hear that. So let's go ahead and get into their schedule overview and my win-loss prediction. So unfortunately for the Lions, they have the 6th hardest schedule in all of the NFL according to strength of schedule. Some key games for them are going to be Week 6 versus Cincinnati. That's, you would consider a winnable game, especially with the run defense that Cincinnati doesn't have. Week 8 against Philadelphia is another one I think they could possibly win. And then Week 13 versus Minnesota. Keep your eyes on this game. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to win it. But don't be surprised, because the week before, that storm alarm or storm siren really has me screwed up right now. But the week before, they play a Thursday night game against Chicago. So they're going to have a little bit more rest coming out of that week. And I think they're going to be able to smash Minnesota in the mouth a little bit at home. So my prediction for this team is I think they're going to go 3-14. Their floor, I think, is 0 wins. I think that's a possibility for them. I don't think it's likely. I don't think they're that bad of a roster. I think the running game is just too good. And I think there are a couple of suspect run defenses they play against, specifically Cincinnati. I think they can win that game on their home turf. I think their ceiling is 5 wins. I could see them eking out a couple of grit and grind wins against some teams on the schedule where the run defense isn't particularly well. Maybe like last year with the Cardinals, they just are still let in a game and they're able to stick around and compete. I think this is a young enough and a scrappy enough team to where if you don't pull away by 14 or so points, they're going to be able to sneak up on you. And another thing is, too, I think even though I think Detroit is going to lose a lot of games this year, as Brett Coleman said, there's going to be a lot of teams in the cold tub after they play this team with how smash mouth, how aggressive, kneecap biting is the perfect word for it, this team is going to be. So the Vegas over-under for them is 4.5. I would say you could comfortably take the under there with Detroit. They might eke out a couple extra wins, but I don't think this is something I would put a lot of money on. But that is something to look out for. So just a final statement on the Detroit Lions for this year. The running game is going to be solid. I have talked about that a lot in this video. But ultimately, the team just doesn't have the talent at receiver, potentially even quarterback. And especially on the defensive side of the ball right now, especially in that secondary, to truly make any strides. So this team is really waiting for 2022 to roll around, and I think that you can make the assumption they're going to be a top 3 pick next year. Now, it will be interesting, depending on how well Jared Goff plays. Are they going to take a Sam Howell or a Spencer Rattler, or do they take a guy like Derek Stingley potentially to put on the other side of Jeff Okuda in case he doesn't work out? Or even Kayvon Thibodeau? That will be interesting to see. But all that will be answered next year, and that is my breakdown of the Detroit Lions for this week. Let me know what you guys thought of the video in the comments below. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. Join me tomorrow as I reveal the number 29 team, finally, or not the 29, excuse me, the 30th team, as we finally get out of the bottom dweller tier in the system and move on to the guys who are non-factors with interesting pieces to watch. So stay tuned until then. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.